Ali Velshi on CNN said, Timothy McVeigh was raised Catholic. Do we then entertain petitions of moving Catholic churches away from the Oklahoma bombing site? The Ground Zero Mosque has brought all sorts of people out of the woodwork, and their underground views have become public and have been made known. And it's interesting to see the type of logic they're using in order to try to make their case. Nancy Pelosi, who's the Speaker of the House of Representatives, wants an investigation of those who are funding the anti-Ground Zero Mosque. Now, this is the essence of fascism, to be sure. Like, who's behind all of this? Who's funding this? Look, the majority of people in the United States are opposed to this mosque. They're not opposed to it on religious grounds. They're opposed to it on a variety of reasons. And because of the First Amendment, we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of assembly, we have freedom of the press, and we have the freedom to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And this is, I would say one thing about Nancy Pelosi, she is correct. This is a local issue. The First Amendment to the Constitution is very clear. Congress shall make no law. And since Congress isn't making a law or evaluating this, these are the people of New York City making this determination. Mayor Bloomberg has said go ahead with it. There are others who are making the same case. Well, the people of New York, a majority of them, don't want to go ahead with it. And so therefore this is a local issue. I don't think this is primarily a religious issue, however. Those who are opposed to this mosque are opposed for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is they feel like this is the wrong place to put a mosque, especially since those who were involved in the plane that crashed into the Twin Towers were in fact self-avowed Muslims. Now, it's not that they were just self-avowed Muslims, but that they had made this decision to do what they did because of their Islamic faith. And there are many people around the world, and a good percentage, say 10% of the Muslim population, who agree with what they did based upon Islam. And of course there is within Islam the idea that it is permissible to kill infidels. Now one of the arguments that has been used favorably, by the way, by some in the Muslim community has been because America is overseas fighting on Islamic soil, that's the reason why they did what they did. That again is not justification for what was done. In fact, if that is in fact the reason why they've done so, then there's another reason as to why we should not put a mosque there. Because there is 10% of the population that would like to see the Islamic invasion of the United States and then the imposition of Islamic law here in the United States through the power of the sword. So Nancy Pelosi says, well, we need to have an investigation in all of this. Should we then investigate the 70% of Americans who are also opposed to this and maybe who have given some funding to promote opposition to all this? Who will be doing this investigation? Who will determine whether this investigation is going? What constitutes wrongdoing? Why no investigation in the funding of the mosque? Where is this $100 million coming from? So that's one side of this particular issue. There are lots of reasons why people don't want this mosque in this particular place in New York. I believe it's a Trojan horse. I believe it's an Islamic Trojan horse because there is a greater attempt among certain elements within the Islamic faith that they want to literally take over the United States. They're doing this in Europe as well. And it has nothing to do with our role in the Middle East. We've been battling the Muslim extremists for quite some time. If you go back to the 18th century, at the end of the 18th century, the Barbary pirates, we had this Treaty of Tripoli in 1797, Treaty of Tripoli in 1805. We had battle with the Muslims back then. It had nothing to do with America being involved in the Middle East. It had nothing to do with America being part of the Crusades. We were not part of the Crusades. There is a larger, more sinister agenda. But what about Ali Velshi's analogy here that Timothy McVeigh was raised Catholic? Do we then entertain petitions of moving Catholic churches away from the Oklahoma bombing site? Here's the huge difference. Timothy McVeigh, while he was raised and baptized in the Catholic Church, he did not use his Roman Catholicism as a basis for what he did. In fact, he himself admitted that he bombed the Oklahoma City Federal Building as and I'm quoting, a retaliatory strike, a counterattack for the cumulative raids and subsequent violence and damage that federal agents had participated in over the preceding years, including but not limited to Waco. So his purpose was in fact political. In fact, his purpose was very similar to the purposes of those who crashed their airplanes into the Twin Towers. And in fact, it is the reason why lots of Muslims around the world are against the United States, because of our expeditions overseas. And so it seems to me that McVeigh should be praised for his actions, because McVeigh, in fact, was doing what these Muslim extremists were doing. And there are lots of critics out there of the United States who kind of support with what these Muslim extremists did. So McVeigh did not carry out the attack in the name of Christianity or the Catholic Church. He did it on the basis of his political views. And in fact, if you go back a little bit further with Timothy McVeigh, he considered himself an agnostic. And you can see these types of things in other places as well. Eric Rudolph, and you may remember Eric Rudolph, he was involved in the Olympic bombings, and people said, "Oh, here you go. Here's this anti-abortion Christian who was doing these things." But when you go back and you read exactly what Eric Rudolph was all about, you'll find something completely different. He says, "Many good people continue to send me money and books. Most of them have, of course, an agenda, mostly born-again Christians looking to save my soul. I suppose the assumption is made that because I'm here, I must be a sinner in need of salvation, and they would be glad to sell me a ticket to heaven, hawking this salvation like peanuts at a ball game. I do appreciate their charity, but I could really do without the condescension. They have been so nice, I would hate to break it to them, that I really prefer Nietzsche to the Bible." So here you have Eric Rudolph, who again has been put up as somebody who represents Christianity. He did not represent Christianity, and there was very, 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 very few, if any, in the Christian movement who supported what Eric Rudolph did. Then there's Paul Hill. Paul Hill was the anti-abortionist who went down in Florida and killed an abortionist, and he was executed for his crime. And there were many in the Catholic Church, many of whom I know. In fact, I personally talked with Paul Hill and attempted to talk him out of this. And the church in which he was in excommunicated him. And I would say a majority in the Christian community opposed what Paul Hill did. And so when the Muslim community, when the general Muslim population, these so-called moderate Muslims, start going after these radical Muslims in a public way, demonstrate in the streets, protest at mosques, which have the desire of preaching the demise of the United States and violence against Christians, then we might take these so-called moderate Muslim seriously. But right now, we are not hearing it from them. And so one of the reasons I don't believe this mosque should be built is because I believe it is a stepping stone here in the United States. It would be a cultural center, just like many mosques here in the United States. Just recently, a mosque in Germany was closed down because it was the place where many of these hijackers who flew the planes into the Twin Towers were based. Germany has an understanding of the problem here, and I believe that this mosque will do the same thing. And so Nancy Pelosi, if she wants to do an investigation, as I wrote in an article, bring it on, Nancy. I'm more than happy for you and anybody else in the government to investigate me on all this, because there is no funding against my opposition. It is my opinion based upon the First Amendment allowing me to do so, and millions of other Americans who have opposition to this Ground Zero Mosque can also voice their opinions against it based upon the First Amendment to the United States.
For more related to this topic, check out God versus Socialism, a biblical critique of the New Social Gospel. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.